In this lesson, we're going to talk about the differences between abstracts and summaries. In the course, first you have an assignment, which we call an annotated bibliography, which is a collection of summaries. Later on in the course, you're going to have to write a research paper in which you're going to have to put an abstract on. And sometimes they're similar, but they're very different, particularly in the context of the course. So I want to talk a little bit about the differences between them. This is an abstract. I divided it into 4 sentences. Now, abstracts can vary a great deal across different types of writing. So there's no one way of writing an abstract. But I want to notice a couple of things about the abstract. If you look at this first sentence that's highlighted in red, what it does is it does what's at the beginning of your paper. It gives a summary of the problem that the author is trying to address. It talks about the high use of features such as informal language, and then there's a contradiction that few studies have been conducted on this topic. So it creates the problem. So one of the things that abstracts often do is follow the outline of the paper. So this is the introduction of the paper. And then the second sentence in green tells you what the paper is about. This paper reports findings from a corpus study. Now, notice in the first 2 sentences, they're both sentences what we call descriptive sentences, because they give you a summary of the paper, summary of the problem, summary of what the research found, but not particular details. And then the third sentence, we hypothesize that one reason, and this gives you a framework for their opinion about what their paper is about. Notice the abstract is told from the point of view of the author, so it's first person. If you don't like first person, you can say this report, as in the previous. And then the final sentence is, the final 2 sentences are both what we call informative sentences. And the final sentence, we argue that Chinese students are primed to favor particular linking adverbials, and so this is their main conclusion. So again, their summary goes through a brief outline of their paper. Here's a second example of an abstract. This is taken from a science journal. Notice the first sentence is a descriptive sentence. It's got a descriptive reporting verb, introduce. The second sentence reports what may be the key finding of the article. And notice the third sentence, which I didn't highlight one. Let me highlight it now. The third sentence, these materials offer is kind of an evaluation sentence. So it's the author's evaluation of their own research. And the fourth sentence also is an evaluation about what's important about the research. Because site locations are locally constrained, structures can be produced in a relative assembly process that merges desirable features. So again, this is what's good about it. So this is almost like a conclusion. So here again, different little pieces of the article are taken. They're all from the point of view of the author. This one doesn't use we do anything, except the first sentence, the descriptive sentence at the beginning, starts with we. The rest is told from the perspective of the authors of the paper. Now, let's look first at a summary that one of the students from a previous course had written. An abstract, remember, it can be of different lengths, and usually you're told how long the abstract should be. It should be 200 words or 300 words or 500 words. In their summary assignment, there are 5 sentences, and one of them is a descriptive sentence. Now, the rest of the sentences are informative. Now, the key difference between the abstract and the summary is that the summary has one sentence describing it, but then the remainder of the sentences all focus on what you consider to be key issues in this field or on this topic that you are particularly interested in. There's no set, this is the most important finding. You can choose any finding that you think is important to your work. Okay, so here the first sentence is uses describe, so you know that's a descriptive sentence. And then the next sentence is they show that it is efficient. So that's a kind of evaluation. It's in a gray area, but it shows what is the results of the key issues. And to support such an efficient query. Now here they're doing something where they're using the third sentence, the one in a kind of blue, to support what they say in the green sentence. Now, in an abstract, you normally don't have to do this. But here, you're really developing an idea more than simply summarizing the different aspects of the article. And then they argue that the regularity of the structure of the finger tree. Okay, so then they say, again, here's another key finding that you think is important. And then the final sentence, after proving the efficiency of finger trees, and then they show that it has wide applications. So that's also a key issue. So you can kind of look at this summary and begin to identify what are the key issues in the research that the writer of the summary is going to address in future articles. And that's what you need to see in a summary article. So today we're going to talk about choosing articles to go with the nouns. This is one of the most difficult aspects of the English language to learn. Very few students really ever master it, but we want to give you an idea of what are some of the considerations in how to choose articles. Sometimes it's important, sometimes it's not important to have the right article, but it's important enough that it's probably a useful thing to understand. I want to start by showing a flow chart that one of my professors showed me. And in part it illustrates 3 steps that you have to use with every noun that you write in English. And you can see just from the fact that there are 3 steps how difficult this can be. The first step is to decide whether the noun is specific, okay? And this is a complicated issue about what it means to be specific. There are a lot of rules make something specific, and we'll look at a few of them. But if the answer is yes, then you can use the. And particularly in academic writing, you use the a lot. So this is an important one. If it's not specific, the second question that you need to ask is whether it's countable. And again, countable can be a very difficult concept. Countable means, can you have more than one? Can you count them individually? And so most words are either countable or not countable, and some words are both, but have different meanings. So if the answer is no, it's not countable, then it doesn't take an article, nothing. If the answer is yes, then you have to determine whether it's singular or plural. And that's fairly simple, but it's a third step. And if the answer is yes, then you use a or and. And if the answer is no, you use nothing. So now I want to just talk about a few examples. And again, it's to sort of generate a few of the rules, particularly that have to do with specificity. So in the first sentence, interacting with neighboring protein. Now, protein, there are many kinds of protein. So protein is a word that's countable. So either you want, if it's going to be singular, you would put a protein. If it's plural, of course, then you could say proteins. Now here in number 2, I'm not even sure how to read this, sodium pump. This part of the sentence is going to make the word pump very specific. It's a specific kind of pump. So it's almost always, and again there's no hard rule, but it would be the. Number 3 is one of the most useful rules for specificity. So here you have a prepositional phrase that modifies the word addition. And the prepositional phrase modifying the word makes this word specific. So it would be the addition. Of cutting planes, okay? Planes is plural, so there's no article before it. And extensive use, and again, of Lagrangian technique, then extensive use is modified by the prepositional phrase. So it's going to be the extensive use. And again, assuming there's one Lagrangian technique, and Lagrangian is going to make the word technique specific, then it's probably the. Now, you're not 100% sure here. It could be Lagrangian techniques or a Lagrangian technique, but without any other evidence, it's probable that it's specific. Okay. Now, of is one preposition. There are other prepositions that sometimes make the noun specific, but not always. So in this case, to remove the values from, now here, domain is modified by a prepositional phrase. From the domain of each variable that cannot meet specific. Now here, specific constraint. Constraint is a countable noun. You can have more than one constraint. And so probably specific would be plural. Now the next one's a little tricky because you see the word a, but actually these go together. This is I think it's a Latin expression, a priori. So pruning is singular, and a priori doesn't make it particularly specific, so it's non-specific and singular, and it would be an a priori pruning of. Now here, search is countable, and this one's a little more, if it was singular, if we're simply talking about the, we could say the search. In this case, it's a little vague if it's more than one search, or if the search is not specific. It would probably be better to actually say each search, depending. So the search if there's one particular search, each search if there's more than one and they're not specific. Okay. Now, number 5 illustrates a somewhat different rule, but also a particularly important one in academic writing. Transgenic plants, now again, transgenic does not make the word plant specific. Some adjectives do, some do not. Plant is a countable noun, so, and it's plural. In which DNA? Now, what DNA are you talking about? You're talking about the DNA of each of the plants. So we call this prior reference, which means even though it's not talking about the same noun, DNA, in plants, it refers to the DNA of each of the plants that had previously been mentioned, which explains what transgenic mean, I guess. Then it would be a specific noun. Number 6, however, Tava et al., 2006, found that ECR switch, okay, now here, this is a kind of interesting rule. Here the term ECR modifies the word switch, so the noun here is switch. So here it would be the ECR switch. ECR makes it specific. With LMRXR, however, is some kind of an acronym. Now with acronyms, they're not specific. So here there's no, it's singular, so there's no article with it. Here is one that we get a little complicated. Partner of CFECR. Now, normally you would think, oh, you have a prepositional phrase of, which makes partner. And if that's the case, it would be the partner of CFECR. Now, there's another way of looking at these prepositional phrases in which you count something about the phrase CFECR. CFECR you can't measure, it's like rain. So this one could be like, say, like rice. So in this one it could say it's like a pound of rice. A pound of rice. Rice doesn't specify pound. Pound measures rice. So in this case, the could be, depending on how many partners there are, it could be a partner. So again, this is something you have to know. I don't know what the reference is from the student's sentence, so I'm not sure what the correct answer is. You have to know how many partners there are. If there's one partner, it would be the. If there's more than one possible partner, it would be a. Okay. Sensitivity here is a non-countable noun. Now, you could also have sensitivity could be a countable noun, but it's used here as a non-countable noun to illustrate a sort of property of this. High Ligon does not make it necessarily specific. So it's non-countable, therefore not specific, therefore there's no article. But also a level, however, is countable. And notice here, level, it does modify activity. Activity is another noun that could be countable or could be non-countable. This is the non-countable form of it. So level modifies that, so it would be a higher level of activity. And activity is not specific, so there's no article there. In the absence of, and again, ligand is countable. So here you have to know, are you referring to a specific ligand or are you referring to any ligand? And this is where it's important that you actually have the article correct. If it's a specific ligand that you're familiar with, and specificity means that you, the writer and the reader or the speaker, both share a knowledge of what noun you're referring to. So if you're referring to a ligand here that you know what it is, probably from prior meeting, it would be the. and if not, it's going to be a ligand. Okay. Number 7 illustrates a common one, other advantage. So, advantage is countable. Other could be specific if it refers to the last one. So if, for example, there are 2 advantages and you've already mentioned one, and now you're going to mention the second one is going to be specific. Now, if it's not a specific, and there are more than 2, and this might be the second one, and there may be 5 advantages, it would simply be a one more, and because it begins with a vowel, you would say another advantage of the grafting technique. Now, the here is used in the sentence, not because of grafting, but because that we know what the grafting technique is tolerance to abiotic stress. Okay, so tolerance here is not countable, it's not specific, but stress, notice here, there are different kinds of stress: salinity, drought, and cold condition. So this has to be countable, and it has to be plural. Stress is a word that could be not countable, like he has a lot of stress. But here it's not. And cold condition. And condition, salinity and drought are not countable, but condition is countable, therefore it would have to be.